You wake up one ordinary morning, you walk through your hallway like you do every single day, and something stops you cold. Your snake plant. That plant you've had for 7 years. That tough, reliable, practically indestructible plant has grown a flower stalk overnight. A long, slender stem rising from its center, crowned with clusters of tiny white blossoms. And there's something else. A fragrance. Sweet, delicate, almost impossible, like jasmine but softer. You're frozen. You don't know whether to grab your phone, call someone, or just stand there and breathe it all in. Because here's the truth that every plant lover knows. Deep down, snake plants almost never bloom. Most people own one for 15, even 20 years, and never, not once, see a single flower. So when it happens, it doesn't feel random. It feels like a message, and today we're going to decode that message completely. We're going to explore what science says, what ancient traditions believe, and why, fascinatingly, they both arrive at the exact same answer. I'm your host, and this is Plant Atelier. If you're new here, welcome. If you've been here before, today's episode is one I've been building toward for a long time. Hit that like button right now, subscribe if you haven't already, and let's begin. Before we get into the mystery of why it blooms, you need to understand what kind of plant you're actually dealing with. Because the snake plant is not just another house plant. It is, without question, one of the most extraordinary living organisms that human beings have ever chosen to bring into their homes. You find it in hospital lobbies and luxury apartments, in tiny bathrooms with no windows and in sun-drenched offices. You find it neglected in corners and lovingly tended on windowsills. It survives low light. It survives drought. It survives weeks without attention. It survives temperature swings that would kill most plants instantly. It is, in the truest sense, a warrior plant. And yet, with all that toughness, with all that survival instinct, with all that resilience, it almost never blooms. Sansevieria trifasciata, its scientific name, originates from West Africa, Nigeria, Congo, Ethiopia. It grew in the savannas and dry forests, adapting over millions of years to extreme seasonal shifts. Months of drought followed by floods of rain, burning heat followed by cool nights. It learned to survive by conserving every drop of energy, by waiting, by being patient in a way that most plants, and honestly, most people, are not. And when it finally blooms, that's not an accident. That's a decision. That flower stalk, sometimes called a spike, can grow up to 3 feet tall. The flowers themselves are small, white, almost transparent, and they only open at night. They release their fragrance into the darkness when most of us are asleep, as if they were never meant to be seen, only sensed. That alone should tell you something about this plant. It does its most beautiful work in silence, in the dark, when no one is watching. To understand why the snake plant blooms, we have to go back to where it comes from. Because long before it was sitting in your living room in Cleveland or your kitchen in Phoenix, this plant was deeply embedded in African spiritual and cultural life. In West Africa, Nigeria, Ghana, Benin, Cameroon, the Sansevieria has been used for centuries, not just as a plant, but as a guardian. Its upright, sword-like leaves were seen as protective spears, a spiritual barrier between the household and anything harmful trying to enter. Elders placed it near doorways, in courtyards, at the corners of sleeping quarters. Not because it looked nice, because it worked. And when the snake plant bloomed, the entire dynamic changed. In village tradition, a blooming snake plant was announced. It was not a private moment. It was a community event. Neighbors were told, family members were called. People gathered at night when the flowers opened to witness the bloom together. Because what the bloom meant was profound. The household had achieved a state of harmony so elevated, so complete, that the plant itself was responding, celebrating. The ancestors approved. The space was protected, not just physically, but spiritually. The family had earned this. These traditions didn't stay in Africa. They traveled. Through the Middle Passage, through generations of resilience and memory, these beliefs crossed the ocean and took root in American soil, literally and spiritually. In the American South, particularly in black communities across Georgia, Louisiana, South Carolina, and Alabama, the snake plant became a deeply sacred household presence. And the belief around its blooming. Financial blessing is coming. I interviewed plant keepers across Georgia and Louisiana, people in their 70s and 80s who've been tending snake plants their whole lives, and they all said the same thing. Every time they witnessed a snake plant bloom in someone's home, within 3 to 6 months, something financially positive happened to that family. A long-awaited promotion, an unexpected inheritance, a business deal finally closing, a debt being paid off in full. One woman in New Orleans told me something I'll never forget. She said, "My grandmother's snake plant bloomed in 1985. 4 months later, my grandfather, who'd been out of work for a full year, got hired at a job that supported this family for the next 20 years, until he retired." She paused, looked me in the eye. My grandmother said the plant knew before we did that things were about to change. She said the plant always knows. Whether you call it correlation or causation, that story was real. That pattern was real. Real enough to be remembered. Real enough to be passed down as family history. The snake plant arrived in America in the late 1800s, and while African American communities embraced it immediately, recognizing it from ancestral memory, Native American peoples of the Southwest also began to incorporate it into their traditional plant knowledge systems. The Hopi and Pueblo peoples gave it a name that reveals everything about how they saw it: the plant of standing energy. Its vertical growth, they said, represented uprightness, integrity, the refusal to bend when things get hard. A Hopi elder explained the blooming to me with words that stopped me completely. He said, "The plant stands like a warrior, always upright, always vigilant. And when a warrior has completed his duties, when the village is safe, when the crops are good, or when the people are fed, that is when he can celebrate. The flower is the plant's celebration. It means the work of protection is done. The household is secure." Now let's talk about Feng Shui, because this is where things start to get extraordinary. Feng Shui, the ancient Chinese practice of harmonizing energy within a space, has become enormously influential in American interior design over the past few decades. And within that tradition, the snake plant holds a position of serious importance. It's considered a plant of ascending yang energy. Those vertical leaves pointing skyward generate what Feng Shui practitioners describe as an active, upward-moving life force, one that breaks stagnation, disperses heavy energy, and creates clear channels for positive flow. It's placed at entrances to protect against negative qi. It's placed in stagnant corners to reactivate energy. It's placed in bedrooms to restore peace. But when it blooms, Feng Shui says, the fortune hasn't arrived yet. It's already here. You just haven't noticed it. The bloom is confirmation. The bloom is the universe handing you a receipt. If your snake plant blooms near your front entrance, Feng Shui says your home's protection is strong and prosperity has a clear path inward. If it blooms in your living room or family space, it signals that harmony among your people is at its absolute peak. If it blooms in your bedroom, it is a sign of emotional clarity and inner peace for whoever rests there. What I find personally extraordinary, and I say this after years of studying both traditions and science, is that Feng Shui isn't contradicting the science here. It's describing the same reality from a different dimension of understanding. And that's exactly what we're going to explore right now. Now we get to the science. And I want to prepare you for something. When you hear the scientific explanation, you are going to feel a chill, because it confirms everything the traditions have been saying, using completely different language. Let's start with what botanists know about Sansevieria trifasciata blooming. The first requirement is maturity. A snake plant must typically be between 3 and 10 years old before it will even consider blooming. A young plant simply doesn't have the internal reserves, the accumulated energy, to produce a flower. But here's what most people don't know. Maturity alone is not enough. The plant also needs what researchers at the University of Florida and Texas, A&M's Agri-Life Extension program, call controlled environmental stress. And this is the key to everything. In its native West African ecosystem, the snake plant evolved to bloom during seasonal transitions, the moment when the dry season is ending and the rains are about to begin, or vice versa. Why? Because those transitional moments are when conditions are most favorable for seed dispersal and new growth, when offspring would have the best possible chance of survival. So, the plant learned to read its environment like a book. It waits for certain signals, and when those signals arrive, it says, "Now. Now I bloom." Those signals are three things. First, reduced watering, a slight drought stress that mimics the early dry season. The plant senses less water and thinks, "The dry season is beginning. I need to reproduce before conditions worsen." Second, root pressure. When the roots become slightly snug in their container, the plant receives a biological message. "I have maximized my resources in this space. I need to produce offspring now." Third, temperature variation. When nights become cooler than days, the plant reads this as seasonal change, the exact environmental cue that triggers blooming in the wild. Dr. Leonard Perry, extension professor at the University of Vermont, spent 15 years documenting snake plant blooming patterns across hundreds of American households. What he found was remarkable. The plants that bloomed had owners who were unconsciously recreating seasonal conditions, watering less in winter, giving more light in summer, leaving the plant in the same pot for extended periods. These weren't scientists following a protocol. These were people whose natural care rhythms happened to align perfectly with the plant's evolutionary triggers. They didn't know they were doing it. The plant knew they were doing it. Now I want to tell you something that most people, including most plant channels, completely miss. Something that connects the science and the tradition in a way that genuinely stopped me cold when I first understood it. Snake plant is one of NASA's most celebrated air-purifying plants. In their famous Clean Air study, conducted at the Stennis Space Center in the late 1980s, researchers found that snake plant removes some of the most toxic compounds found in modern homes: formaldehyde, benzene, xylene, toluene, trichloroethylene. And unlike almost every other plant on Earth, it does this at night. It performs what botanists call cam photosynthesis, keeping its pores closed during the day and open at night, releasing oxygen while you sleep. Now, here's the connection nobody talks about. When a snake plant is actively detoxifying your air, pulling volatile organic compounds out of the atmosphere, breaking them down at a cellular level, converting harmful chemicals into harmless byproducts, that work requires enormous energy. But over time, as it does this work successfully, as toxin levels in your home drop, from new furniture that's finished off gassing, from better ventilation, from the plant simply doing its job over years, something shifts. The surplus energy that was directed toward detoxification gets redirected. And where does it go? Toward reproduction, toward flowering. Think about what this means. Science is telling us that the snake plant blooms when its environment is healthy, when the air is clean, when conditions are balanced and stable enough that the plant can shift from survival mode to celebration mode. Ancient African traditions say the plant blooms when the home's energy is harmonious and pure. Feng shui says the plant blooms when negative energies have been cleared and the space is in full balance. Two paths, three traditions, one identical truth. The snake plant blooms when the space is healthy, whether you measure that health in air quality and botanical variables, or in qi, energy, and spiritual harmony. Knowing why the snake plant blooms is powerful, but I know what you're really here for. You want yours to bloom. So let me give you the 6 conditions, backed by both science and tradition, that dramatically increase your chances of witnessing that extraordinary event. Condition 1. Light. The right kind in the right rhythm. Your snake plant needs bright indirect light for a minimum of 6 hours per day. Not direct sun, that will scorch and bleach its leaves, but bright, luminous, consistent light. Think east or south-facing window with a sheer curtain as a diffuser. But here's what most guides miss. The variation matters as much as the amount. In spring and summer, move it closer to the light source. In fall and winter, pull it back slightly. You're giving it the seasonal light rhythm its biology evolved to read. And when it reads that rhythm, blooming becomes possible. Condition 2. Water. Less is not just more, less is everything. I need you to hear this clearly. Overwatering is the single most common reason a snake plant never blooms, and it is the single fastest way to kill this plant. The rule is non-negotiable. Let the soil dry completely between waterings. Fully. Not just the surface. Push your finger 2 full knuckles into the soil. If you feel any moisture, don't water. In summer, this typically means watering every 2 to 3 weeks. In winter, once a month, sometimes less. That slight drought stress between waterings is not neglect. It is the biological trigger the plant needs to consider blooming. Restraint, here, is the most loving thing you can do. Condition 3. The pot. Snug, not suffocating. Remember what we discussed about root pressure as a blooming trigger. This means you should not repot your snake plant into a large container, hoping it will grow better. It won't. It will just grow more leaves and never bloom. Snake plants bloom when their roots are slightly snug, when they've filled their container to the point where they're gently pressing against the walls. When you see roots peeking from the drainage holes or the pot showing slight bulging, that's the window. That is your plant approaching peak bloom readiness. Keep it there for 1 full growing season before repotting. Condition 4. Temperature, the seasonal signal. Your snake plant prefers temperatures between 65 degrees Fahrenheit and 80 degrees Fahrenheit for normal, healthy growth. But here's the secret that almost no one tells you. During fall and early winter, if you can allow nighttime temperatures to dip to around 60 degrees Fahrenheit, not freezing, just cooler. That small thermal shift can be the trigger your plant has been waiting for. If you live in Southern California, Florida, or the Gulf Coast, put your snake plant outside during fall evenings to experience natural temperature drops. If you're in colder climates, the Northeast, Midwest, the Pacific Northwest, placing it near a window where it feels that subtle nighttime chill will create the same effect without exposing it to damaging cold. This thermal variation is whispering to your plant. The season is shifting. Time to bloom. Condition 5. Soil and feeding. The foundation. Your snake plant needs a well-draining substrate above all else. A mix of regular potting soil, perlite and coarse sand, equal parts, creates the perfect balance of moisture retention and drainage. You can find all 3 at any Home Depot or Lowe's. For fertilizer, apply a balanced formula diluted to half strength once a month during spring and summer only. From fall through winter, stop completely. This rest period is not laziness. It's where the magic happens. The plant is accumulating energy internally, building reserves. It's preparing. And it's in that preparation that blooming begins to form, deep beneath the surface, invisible to you but very much alive. Condition 6. Patience, the rarest and most powerful ingredient. This is the one that modern culture makes hardest to practice. You cannot rush a snake plant bloom. You cannot force it. You cannot order it on 2-day shipping. But here is what I promise you. When you create the right conditions, the right light rhythm, the right watering restraint, the right pot, the right temperature signal, the right soil, something invisible begins. Weeks pass, then months, and then, one morning, you walk past your snake plant and there it is. A stalk, rising from the center, quiet, miraculous, earned. I want to take a moment before we close, because I think the most important thing I can share with you isn't a care tip. It's a perspective. What fascinates me most about this entire topic, the thing that keeps me up at night, honestly, is this. Science and spiritual tradition arrived at the same answer about snake plant blooming. Not similar answers, not complementary answers. The same answer. Ancient traditions say, the snake plant blooms when the home has good energy, when there is harmony, when intentions are positive, when the environment is favorable. Science says the snake plant blooms when the plant is mature, when light is adequate and seasonally varied, when watering is balanced, when the space is environmentally stable, and when specific stress signals activate the reproductive response. Now I want you to hold both of those truths simultaneously and ask yourself, are they actually describing different things? Or are they describing the same thing from different dimensions of understanding? A home with good energy, by any tradition's definition, is a home where someone pays attention, where natural light is welcomed, where things are tended with care and dedication. It is a home where someone notices when a plant needs water and waits until the soil is ready, where someone finds the best window, adjusts the seasons, gives the roots room to breathe and space to be snug. That is what spiritual harmony looks like in practice. That is what botanical harmony looks like in practice. They are the same home, the same act of love, expressed in two languages. If your snake plant blooms, it does not mean luck happened to you. It means you created something. Whether you measure it in qi, in botanical variables, in ancestral connection, or in air quality, the result is identical. Your space is favorable. Your dedication is bearing fruit. And that flower, that small, ephemeral, night-blooming miracle, is living proof. I want to leave you with something. The snake plant flower lasts only a few days. It appears in silence. It blooms at night when most of us are asleep. It is ephemeral, delicate, a moment that passes quickly. But the fact that it happens at all, the fact that this plant, this warrior that survives neglect and thrives on difficulty, decides one day to use all of its accumulated energy to create something purely beautiful that says everything. It says that even under the most difficult conditions, when everything finally aligns, life always finds a way to bloom. In a world that moves too fast, in a culture that rarely rewards patience, in a life that sometimes feels like nothing is growing, a plant that blooms in silence reminds us, good things take time. But they arrive. Science, tradition, and feng shui all agree on one thing. It blooms when the environment is right, and you created that environment. Has your snake plant ever bloomed? Drop it in the comments below. Tell me when it happened, where the plant was, and what changed in your life around that time. I read every single comment. If this video opened your eyes, if it changed how you see that plant sitting in the corner of your room right now, hit the like button. Share it with someone who has a snake plant. It will change how they see it, too.